All right. Hey, everybody. Happy Sunday afternoon or evening, depending on where you're at. It's good to see you. So as you guys know, we're here, we're going over the code, and it looks like we have 2 hours tonight. So hopefully we'll take a bite out of it at least tonight. We also have an hour next week if we need that. So that's 3 hours. But after that, the following 2 weeks, so the last Sunday in May and the first Sunday in June, I won't be here. So I am kind of hoping that we'll finish up the code before we take a 2-week break, just because it seems nice and neat that way. So we'll see how it goes. Also, I did receive a couple of questions in email from a friend, and I had said that I would answer the questions tonight, and I may. But as I read the questions and contemplated them, I thought, I'm not really ready to answer those questions yet because there's another part of the code I'd like to go over first. So I'm going to put the questions aside. And then after I get far enough into the code where I think the questions apply, I'll bring them back out. What I'd like to do is just kind of bring us up to speed to where we were last week by reading over the first couple of paragraphs again, because we only did 2 paragraphs last week. And then we'll see if we can get into that 3rd paragraph. So let me share my screen. My dog is going to sleep. She's like, oh my God, that boring stuff is starting. She's funny because she'll go to sleep when I start teaching, but as soon as I say bye to you guys, she knows that means I'm done and she jumps right up. She's like, okay, it's over. All right, so let's get into this boring stuff. That's my dog's opinion. So this is the first 2 paragraphs of the code, which we covered last week. The code is ideas. Just as all things within illusion are ideas. The code can be seen as specific manifestations in form, can be felt as feelings, or can be heard as thoughts. The best way to look at the code is as the potential driver of experience. I say it is the potential driver of experience because code will only drive your experience if you fully believe the code. Even if you let go of your belief in the code partially. And of course, that means even if you let go of your belief in manifestation, emotions, and thought partially, it no longer has full influence over you. The code can only drive your experience to the degree that you believe the code. The code comes from you, all of you, as you perceive yourself now, but that is you. The code that most directly influences you in the experience as an individual is the code that most directly comes from you, which means the believing that happens in the experience of the individual. But all code influences upon each other so that no true separation in code can be determined. It is really important to accept that there is no separation, and this is always true and always reflected within the code. And I think one of the things I said last week related to the fact that there is no separation is that, for example, when a person goes into a school, or I think over the weekend there was a supermarket shooting. So when a person goes to a supermarket and decides to shoot people, the blame typically goes on the person that walked into the school or walked into the supermarket and started shooting. But the enlightened perspective realizes that the thoughts that came into that person's mind came from all of us. and what we're all putting our attention, our believing attention on. And so in reality, you can't blame that individual. This is why everyone is actually innocent. And again, this goes back to what Jesus said from the cross, or at least what he is said to have said from the cross. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do, right? All they're doing is believing their thoughts. And how many of us do that, you know? And the thoughts that are coming into that mind, where are they coming from? All of us. So, you know, you can't really say that that person is guilty. But what you can do is you can begin to take responsibility for your own believing attention. And this is what the code is going to point out for us. So I'm going to jump into that third paragraph now. The code makes illusion. And by the way, if you don't know the definition of illusion, illusion is something that appears to be something other than what it is. That's what an illusion is. An illusion is something that appears to be something other than what it is. And so when this says the code makes illusion, what this really means is the code takes the light of God and makes it appear to be something other than the light of God. Or the way some people might say it, the code takes consciousness and makes it appear as something other than consciousness. Or some people would even say the code takes spirit and makes it appear as something other than spirit, right? These are all just different ways of expressing it. But that's why it's called an illusion, because again, the truth is all that's true. The truth is all that is, but it appears as something else because of this believing attention. So the code makes illusion. As long as you experience any degree of illusion, you experience the code. So if you genuinely experience everything as God or as consciousness or whatever way you express it, you're no longer experiencing illusion. But if you can't say that you consistently, genuinely experience everything all the time as only God or as only consciousness, then you are still experiencing at least some degree of illusion, even if you sometimes experience everything as God. And sometimes there are people who have that in-between experience, right? Sometimes it feels like they are experiencing everything as God, but then something may happen, their believing attention goes to that, and they're right back into experiencing things as something other than God. So the code makes illusion. As long as you experience any degree of illusion, you experience the code. And you always experience the totality of the code, although the code can be experienced differently. This is because the code is layered code. And the layers are different vibrational levels of the same basic code. Add to that the phenomenon of an individual scripted interpretation, and the code seems to have a myriad of different angles, but it is all one code. Let me go back to Dr. David Hawkins' map of consciousness again. Just in case anybody wasn't here before when I talked about this, I just want to say I am not here to teach Dr. David Hawkins. I haven't done enough reading of Dr. David Hawkins to even attempt that. But I do like his symbol. His symbol fits well with the teaching of the code. And so I just want to use it because it gives us a nice visual. What this paragraph says is that when we experience the code, we're really all experiencing the same code. As an example, right now there is a war in Ukraine, and we're all aware of that same. There aren't some people that are, at least paying attention to the news and stuff that say, I didn't know there was a war. I mean, if they're paying attention, when they look at the TV, they hear the same news report, right? They're not hearing a different news report because they're more enlightened. So everybody experiences the same code. However, that code is experienced from different vibrational levels. And this is where Dr. David Hawkins' map is really useful. So if you're below what he calls level 200, which I call the lower ego, which again is the level of shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride, courage, and really any of these, your perception is strongly driven by ego. And what that means literally is that the thoughts that are coming into the mind you believe are your thoughts. You also believe your thoughts are right. You believe that whatever they are saying is true. That's to be driven by ego. I love the way Byron Katie refers to people driven by ego. She calls them believers. That's an excellent way of saying it, because that's what's going on when you are below level 200 on this map, is you're just believing whatever comes into your mind. So we're going to call this a lower vibrational level. And if your experience is in the lower ego, if you are a believer, then you experience the code from that perspective. You could be more heavily, according to Dr. David Hawkins' teachings, you could be more heavily affected by anger. You could be more heavily affected by fear. You could more heavily be affected by apathy or shame, depending on the level you're at. And what will happen is that you will interpret the thoughts that come into your mind at that vibrational level, and they provide you the opportunity to interpret all of experience with these filters. When someone is at the courage level, there's some kind of a drive in them that's leading them to want to use everything in experience for the purpose of healing the mind or purification or letting go of believing or awakening, however this is worded, it doesn't matter. But they're wanting to use everything in their life, everything in their experience for that purpose. So when something happens, a person who really is in fear and is believing all of those fear thoughts is going to think, oh my gosh, this is terrible. This needs to be avoided. What are we going to do about this, right? A person who's in courage, even if fear thoughts show up, that person sees this as an opportunity to look at these thoughts, let go of these thoughts, which means don't believe these thoughts, practice rest, accept, and trust. Do what, maybe practice inquiry, practice whatever spiritual practice feels right in order to let go of believing the exact same type of thought. So this is the difference between somebody that's living from the lower ego, who just believes the thoughts that come into their mind, and someone who's living from courage, where the same types of thoughts are coming into the mind, but their focus is on healing or awakening or purification. So you can tell that these two individuals are going to have an entirely different experience of the exact same thing. The person in courage, will have a thought like, I can only share what the thoughts were in my mind, but it's a thought like, this is here for my healing, right? That's why this is here. This is happening to help me awaken. A person in fear or any of these other lower ego positions is not going to see it that way. It's just, this is a terrible thing. This shouldn't be happening. I'm scared to death. What are you guys doing? How are you guys surviving this? It's just a completely different way of seeing. As you move even above courage in the vibrational levels, You get into the levels of neutrality or willingness or acceptance. Interestingly, the things that strongly affect people in the lower ego, and even to some degree strongly affect courage, except courage is using that differently, right? They're using how they're affected differently, doesn't have as much of an effect. What's happening in the neutrality and willingness and acceptance stage, it's not the same as apathy, right? Apathy is just a defense mechanism. Apathy is, turning off your emotions so that you don't have to feel them. That's completely different. But when you get to neutrality, willingness, and acceptance, you're at a higher vibrational level where you are seeing, in effect, that the world is the world. The world continues to be the world. It runs in cycles. These things continue to happen. All of these people are out here believing. But your focus now is on the unaffectedness, right? You're turning your attention to the unaffected nature that we all are. You have compassion for the believers. Jesus was having compassion for the believers when he said, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do," right? That was compassion, but he was not one of the believers, even though he was the one hanging on the cross, right? So as you raise up, you start to see things do not affect you. And we aren't just talking about far away things like a war in Ukraine when you aren't in Ukraine, right? We're talking about things that happen in your everyday life. In fact, that's a really good test to see if you are genuinely in these higher vibrational areas of neutrality, willingness, and acceptance or not. One friend of mine said in his house, twice in his life, he has been affected by a fire. If I remember correctly, and I might get the details a little wrong, once it was his sister's house, and I think a family member was actually lost in that fire. And then another time it was his own house, right? And he lost, no one lost their life, but he lost everything in the fire. And he made a comment that it's one thing to say that you are unaffected by that fire that happened over there to those people. It's another thing to be unaffected by the fire that's happening here, right? And that's a real test you can pay attention to. Just because you aren't affected by the war in Ukraine, if you aren't in Ukraine, may not mean a thing, right? Are you affected by the price of gas? Are you affected by inflation? Are you affected by the stock market? Are you affected by the fact that your lover just left you? Are you affected, are you affected by what's going on in your own life? And as you get in these higher levels, you will start to discover that you aren't, not the way you used to be. You just aren't. There's an acceptance that starts to happen. It starts to go with everything. The unaffected nature is becoming much stronger. So again, if you are in the neutrality, willingness, acceptance vibrational level, somewhere in there, you'll experience the same thing that the person in courage is experiencing, but you'll experience it differently. For you, it has no effect or a very small effect. You're able to turn your attention to it very quickly, see what's going on with you, let it go, and return to peace somewhat easily. Where the courage person seems to be, very devoted to, this is here for my healing, but it does feel like more of an effort. There's still some work going on in order to let go of the believing. And of course, the person down here in the lower ego is completely believing it and everything's wrong, right? So we're looking at the exact same thing, and we have 3 different ways of experiencing it based on the vibrational level. And then, of course, when you get up into the love and the joy areas, well, this is where you're really starting to see everything as God. You're really genuinely, you aren't just saying this stuff. Everything is perfect. Well, here, you're not only not affected, but you actually are very aware of the temporary nature of whatever that is. And you're very aware of the fact that this is all God. This is all perfect. This is all wonderful, right? So more than unaffected, you are seeing truly here. Exact same thing. We can be looking at the exact same circumstance, experiencing the exact same circumstance, but based on the vibrational level. Here, it's being experienced with love and joy. Everything is God. Everything is perfect. Here, I'm noticing, here in the acceptance, willingness, neutrality, I'm noticing that I am not affected like I used to be. If I am, I'm able to look at it quickly, see what's going on in my mind and let go of it very quickly and return to peace very quickly. Courage, this is here for my healing, and I may be rest, accepting, and trusting and praying, and that may feel like an effort, but I'm using what is happening. And then in the lower ego, this is just awful, right? And then, of course, when you get up to peace through enlightenment, which I'm not going to talk about because it's not yet my experience, remember, so I'm only going to talk about briefly. But here, what happens at level 600 is the perspective that you are a person completely dies. So here, you're not even a person anymore. So everything is completely different from peace through enlightenment. But again, I'm not going to talk about the experiences that are beyond me. The point of what I was just sharing from this paragraph is that even when we experience the same basic code, we experience it completely differently based on the vibrational level that we are currently abiding at, right? So the vibrational level within consciousness that you are currently abiding at has a very strong effect. In fact, probably is the only thing that matters about how you experience everything. So again, the code makes illusion. As long as you experience any degree of illusion, you experience the code. And you always experience the totality of the code, although the code can be experienced differently. This is because the code is a layered code, and the layers are different vibrational levels of the same basic code. Add to that the phenomenon of an individual scripted interpretation, which means the thoughts that are coming into your mind. And the code seems to have a myriad of different angles, but it is all one code. For example, the individual scripted interpretation that is probably coming into the minds of most people in the West is that the war in Ukraine is wrong, right? That's somehow the interpretation that is most likely coming into most minds. That is not the interpretation that's coming into the minds of Vladimir Putin or many of the Russian people who are experiencing this from a different perspective. So because there are different perspectives, different code coming into the different characters' minds, they see the exact same thing differently. So there's two things affecting how you see. One, your vibrational level, and two, the individual interpretation that's coming into the mind, and still your vibrational level, because if I'm a lower ego vibration, I'm believing those thoughts completely. If I'm a courage level vibration, I'm questioning those thoughts and letting them go. If I'm a neutrality, willingness, or acceptance level person, those thoughts don't mean much to me anymore. I mean, I see them, but they're not having an effect. And if I'm a love or beyond type of person, those thoughts are really completely meaningless. I mean, I don't even see them as my thoughts anymore. So what I'm going to do now, and which we've been doing as we go through this, is I stop after every paragraph and I see where there are questions or comments. So it's time to do that because I finished my teaching of paragraph 3. All right, okay, there's a hand right there. So Lena.
Dear Regina, thank you. If you can, in a couple of words, what does it mean, the war? You mean that from the higher point of view, this is completely what?
It's a cycle is the way I see it. I can speak from my point of view. It's a cycle. The world runs in cycles. One of the other teachings that I've taught many, many times, and I'll type this into the chat, is it's a cycle of what I think, I see. And first of all, what this particular sentence means is what I think. Thinking is literally just believing thought. Thinking isn't the creation of thought. None of us create our thoughts, right? The thoughts appear. I believe it. That is what's called thinking. It's not really thinking, which is why Jesus in A Course in Miracles says, you think. It's just believing. But what I believe, what thoughts come into my mind, and then I believe them, I see. And what this means is I perceive it. So, like one thing that a lot of people still have is that belief in their own unworthiness in one form or another. So when unworthiness thoughts come into the mind, they give their attention to those unworthiness thoughts. And then somebody says something to them and they perceive it as an insult, or somebody does something and they perceive it as hurtful because they have in them the belief that they are bad. And so they are interpreting it from that vibrational level, which is really the shame vibrational level. So whatever I believe, what I think, I'm going to perceive, I see. That's step one in the loop. Now, the next step in the loop is what I see, I experience. So this means, for example, going back to the unworthiness example, if I believe thoughts of unworthiness when they come into the mind, then I perceive insults, or I perceive dirty looks, or I perceive this mistake, made me bad, whatever. Then I'm going to start experiencing it, which means I'm going to experience the feelings of shame, unworthiness, guilt, right? I'm going to experience whatever I am perceiving. And then the next sentence in the loop is what I experience, I think, which means the whole thing just continues again. I had thoughts of unworthiness came into the mind. I believed those thoughts. I perceived myself as unworthy. Something in the world made me unworthy, maybe my mistake at work. I experienced that shame. Oh my gosh, I hope everybody thinks I'm a fool. And then I start believing those thoughts again. Now, and it just keeps going. It's a cycle. Now, this is written at the individual level, but that cycle is also true at the global level. So, for example, when we look at the war that is happening now, if we know anything about history, we know it's not the first time this has come around, where there has been some leader who has been very interested in conquering and growing his kingdom, his area, right? This has happened over and over again since the beginning of the world. It's happening now, yes. It's painful, yes. But it's the world caught in a cycle. And the reason it's important to see that is that this is just the cycle, is because the cycle is coming from the believing. And the cycle isn't just coming from Vladimir Putin's believing. The cycle is coming from all of our believing. It's creating the energy. It's creating the thoughts that are going into the mind of Vladimir Putin that he's believing, right? So what the higher vibrational mind sees is my job is to let go of believing the types of thoughts, the types of energy that create this type of experience. So, one thing you could do, for example, is you could start paying attention for, obviously you're not trying to conquer the world, but are there places where you are possessive? Or are there places where you want more? Or, because you know what, these are all the same types of thoughts. It may seem smaller in our little world in the way that we're possessive, right? But it's the same energy, and it's that energy that's collecting and creating these types of scenes. So what I was taught to do is I was taught to, when I watched the news, and I was taught to do this long before this war, way back when other things were happening in the world. But I was taught that when I watched the news and when I saw these things happening that I thought were bad and shouldn't be, to start looking for what energy is that. And now, how am I believing that same energy? To take responsibility, not guilt, You know, sometimes people get the word responsibility and guilt mixed up, because guilt is just another lower ego vibration. And you don't transcend the lower ego with the lower ego. What the lower ego vibration does is it keeps you in the lower ego. So it's not that I'm guilty for my possessiveness, or that I'm guilty for my racist thoughts, or that I'm guilty for my whatever it is that I'm looking at. It's just that I want to see them. I want to realize with an aha type of mind, that's the type of believing that's creating these appearances in the world. And I want to start taking responsibility when those thoughts come into this mind. I want to see them, recognize them for what they are, and let them go.
Yes.
So does that answer your question, Lena?
Perfect. Perfectly. The more enlightened people, the better world will be, right?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, Michelle.
You may have just answered it, Regina, but my question was about really learning how to question the mind. So there are certain things in my mind that appear as fact.
Mhm.
And yet, that's not true. They're not facts, they're beliefs. So how do I begin to unravel that?
Well, the first answer is the first answer I think I always give. I feel like a broken record. The first answer is to want to. You know, if people want to continue to believe that they're right, you remember in A Course in Miracles, it says, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? You know, we could change that to, do you want to be right or do you want to be clear? Right? Do you want to be right or do you want to be enlightened? Right? The happiness means that level of happiness, of course. And as you know, most people want to be right. So that's the problem right there, is wanting to be right. So we have to want the be happy part more. It's all about desire. It's all about, what do I want? If I want to be happy, and I'm not talking about temporary happiness, I'm talking about enlightenment, awakening, right? Clarity. Then I'm going to want to question my thoughts. And as a result, it will begin to happen. I'm sure it's already begun to happen with you. It will begin to happen. Also, one thing that I found is, as I wanted happiness more, believing the lower ego became more painful. It physically began to hurt. In fact, people often ask me how I let go of judgment, because judgment is, you know, such a booger, right? And the honest answer is, it just started hurting too much. You know, once upon a time, I could judge somebody and feel self-righteous, kind of feel good. Now that's a sick kind of feeling good, but you don't even notice it, right? Right? But as the desire for clarity, for truth, for enlightenment became stronger, there was no feeling good in judging. There was only hurting. And so that pain is pushing you to question. That pain is pushing you to let go. So, you know, the pain really is showing up. Just like if I had cancer right now, I'd probably be feeling some little pain in some part of my body. And that pain is telling me I should go to the doctor and have this checked out, right? And then the doctor's like, oh my gosh, you have cancer. Okay, so pain is a form of communication. It's not a bad thing. We think it's bad, but that's wrong. It's a form of communication. The pain is saying there's something here that's out of harmony with the way we want the body to work, right? Same thing is true spiritually. There's some believing going on here that's out of harmony with what you really want. And so it begins to hurt. And that helps us to really look and question, because, you know, we're all smart enough to know we don't want this pain, or if we aren't smart enough, we'll figure it out at some point. And so that pain begins to lead us to question and lead us away from the believing. Now, do you have more to your question, including anything specific that you want to share and talk about?
One of the areas, and I've heard you mention this, one of the areas this comes up around is money. All right. And I'm really aware that money is not really a lack issue presently, right? And yet that belief in lack is still there in the mind. And with it is a fear. There's always this underlying fear of, I'm not lacking at the moment, but I'm going to reach a moment where I will be lacking. And I can look at this and I can say, this is crazy. It's not based on anything real. And yet that thought is still there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because that one was, was forced on me. All right. I mean, I guess not forced. I wasn't forced to follow guidance, but the guidance led me to a place where I was no longer making money in the way I knew how to do it. And I wanted, again, my desire was very strong and I wanted to follow this guidance. I wanted to see where it was taking me. And so I had to let go of that fear. So it was kind of in that way, quote, jokingly, forced on me. And I understand that not everybody has the guidance, nor would I recommend that anybody just quit their job to find out what's going to happen. If you aren't guided to quit your job, you shouldn't. So it's funny because just before I came in here, I was talking to somebody who has, 5 to 6 times more money than me. And it is his firm belief that he does not have enough money to retire. And I was trying to explain to him, he has plenty of money. In addition to having 5 or 6 times more money than me, he has a pension. I don't have a pension, So I was trying to explain to him he has plenty of money. And he's like, but what if, what if? So, all right. So he can work 10 more years if he wants to. I hope that he gets to retire someday. I had another friend once upon a time who was always afraid of her investments. She also apparently had some money and she would invest her money. And then she would go home and she would start worrying, oh my gosh, I made the wrong decisions. I invested it wrongly. It's going to drop. I'm going to lose my money. And she would call up her broker again and change the investments. This cycle, I knew her for approximately 10 years. This cycle was going on that entire time. And she was terrified, always terrified. Again, that what I think, I see, what I see, I experience, what I experience, I think. She couldn't sleep. Her body was getting sick from her worry about, did I invest the money right? Unfortunately, while riding her bike one day, she got hit by a cement truck. She never retired. She never touched that money. It never happened for her. For me, that was even though I already learned the lesson, it was still an exclamation point. The exclamation point was, my job is only to know my guidance and to follow my guidance. I am not to have thoughts for the future or imaginations about the future at all. It's not just lack, do I have enough money? It's the whole ball of wax. You could die tomorrow. Does the amount of money you have matter at all? Does it have any meaning at all if you die tomorrow? It has zero meaning, right? So I think it's a lot more than just lack. It's believing, again, this imagination of the future, this imagination of what I need, this, and as a result, because we're believing all of these thoughts, we are not tuning into whatever my right now intuition is. If my right now intuition is to buy something, buy it. If my right now intuition is to walk by something and don't buy it, don't buy it. Intuition comes in both forms, right? Buy and don't buy. If my intuition right now is to put aside $500 a month and invest it, do it. It doesn't matter that the stock market's dropping. If it's go ahead and put that 500 in, put that 500 in, do it. If the intuition is not to invest, instead to give all the money away to charity, do that. The trick is to tune into the intuition, to know that money really is not my security. God is my security. And just follow the intuition and learn. The only way to learn that the intuition is always right is to follow it. You can't learn it any other way. I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, for me, it really was like stepping off of a cliff over and over and over again. Because there certainly were thoughts in the mind as I was getting this guidance along the way, saying that somehow this was going to be the end of the world. This is where I was blowing it. This is where I was going too far, trusting guidance, right? And I had to step off the cliff again. But every time I step off the cliff, I fell into a marshmallow cloud that was flying through the sky. So I eventually got to where when the guidance came to step off another cliff, I could step with no problem at all. I learned I don't need to know anything. I don't need to plan anything. And that doesn't mean, for example, if I'm guided to take my mom on a trip, I don't plan and get the hotels, because that kind of practical planning does happen. But I don't need to worry about my future and think about my future. I just need to live my now. That's what guidance is. I just need to live my now.
Thank you. That's the biggest thing that I'm noticing is when the mind is in fear, it's not now. It's not
right
now.
Yeah. I remember also, back when I was terrified, I received this message from Holy Spirit that said to me, I don't remember the exact words, of course, but the gist of it was to see God as a loving father, who is talking to a child and knows the child is afraid. And it says to the child, walk this far, take this step. It's only asking for that step right now. So take that step. And then you'll learn that your father walked along with you, holding your hand the whole way. And then when the loving father says, okay, great. You did that. Perfect. Good job. Now let's take this step, right? Take that step. And this is how you will learn that this loving father can be trusted all of the time. But it's never going to ask us really to jump off a cliff. It may feel like that because we're afraid to get on the bicycle the first time, right? But when we get on the bicycle the first time with our dad holding our seat, we're not in danger. So it feels like you're taking a big risk, but you aren't. And by doing it over and over and over again, the fear that you're taking a big risk falls away. So anything else you want to say, Michelle?
Just thank you.
Okay, good. And you're so clear. I mean, I know you. I also know that you doubt that, but you need to drop that doubt because you're so clear. Just rely on your clarity. You're in good hands. All right. So Kathleen.
I have to unmute myself here. Okay. All right. Thank you. I just met you through the conference or through the Evolve thing. It was wonderful. I've been on a path for like 25 years and I never heard any of this stuff. It's so practical. It's what I really like about it. But I have a question about thoughts in a way. I thought I heard you once say that there are some thoughts that come from the higher self,
Yes.
not as opposed to the lower, the little me.
Yes.
And how do you tell the difference?
I'm going to give you a brief answer now, and then maybe I'll come back after the 2-week break and answer that in more detail, because I think I would like to spend a whole hour on that. So I'll write that down as what I'll do after the code. But the brief answer is when you get to know the ego and you get to know wisdom, they're completely different and they never look like each other, ever. The ego can never look like wisdom and wisdom can never look like the ego. So it's a matter of getting to know them well. And then it's easy to tell which is which. So first you have to get to know them. And that's what I probably did that in Evolve. It'll probably be a review for you, but that's what I'll do after vacation. I'll come back and we'll get to know the ego really well. And we'll get to know wisdom really well. Also, and I'm sure I said this in Evolve too, But also, the one obstacle that I notice that gets in people's way the most is still wanting to be this person, still wanting to be me with my desires, my preferences, what I want in life. And the truth is, awakening is letting go of being this person. So as long as what I really want is to be me and get what I want, I'm going to love that ego because it's the one that's promising me that. Although it doesn't actually deliver, consistently, at least. It's the one that's promising that. Wisdom isn't promising that. Wisdom is leading you away from that. So people get very attached to the ego because the ego is promising them a happy me, a safe me. Awakening is seeing that I am not this.
Yeah. I guess related to that is, I think I've been following guidance without actually knowing what I was doing. Because I recently made a trip during COVID, that was very dangerous, but the heart was saying, do it, and so I followed that.
Yes.
And there's a kind of visceral thing connected to it. And somehow I've been sort of stumbling around and, even though the mind was chattering and saying, no, 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 and all the external world was saying, no, 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 there was just something deeper that said, it's okay. And so I trusted that and it turned out to be, but I don't know, I'm new to this. And it was only when you described it, I thought, oh, I've been doing that, but I didn't realize that that's what I was doing.
Yeah. In fact, if you were in Evolve, when we got to know the two, the ego and the Holy Spirit, everything's okay was on the Holy Spirit side of the map.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's telling you, go ahead, do it. This is okay. You're okay. That's coming from wisdom. Ego doesn't say you're okay. Ego says you're not okay. And here's what I'm going to do to save you.
Yeah. It's the more subtle thing, though. It's not, the mind is yelling and screaming.
Yes.
Whereas the deeper wisdom is much quieter. It's much more, so I just need to, I think, that's partly why I do meditation or something, just to get out of the mind so that I can hear, what's deeper.
Yes.
But the other thing is, how do you know the difference between guidance and imagination? Because I know your distinction was between the ego and the Holy Spirit, but isn't there like an imaginative component to that too?
Yes, there absolutely is. And the answer that I give to that question is be happy with what is right now and where you are right now. If you aren't desiring anything, then your imagination doesn't make up ways to meet that desire. If I'm sitting here where I live now and I'm saying, oh my God, I hate this place. It is so cold in the winter, which is not true, but people can exaggerate. It's cold in the winter and it's hot in the summer and it's dusty and there's wind and there's forest fires and oh my God, I want to go somewhere else. My imagination is going to start leading me somewhere else. But if I am perfectly happy here and I'm just, I'm going to stay here as long as God brought me to Pueblo, I'm staying in Pueblo till God tells me to leave. Then when it comes in to leave, I know it didn't come from me because I wasn't sitting here dreaming about leaving.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
just accept what is, be happy with what is, and you're not making stuff up.
Okay. And also a quick question. I don't know, this is probably not a good question, but you talk about the levels, that you were just Dr. David Hawkins levels. And it's like, it occurred to me, like, I'd like to get rid of all of those lower levels and go right to the, is you don't do that. You have to go through step by step, right?
Well, there are people, no, it doesn't have to go step by step. There are people who awaken from the lower ego to like the level of love, or I think even sometimes the level of joy. But before they proceed to level 600, what they end up doing is they end up going through the purification from a higher perspective. In fact, Byron Katie herself did that. Byron Katie took a very large leap from shame, which was the lowest level. She was at the bottom, all the way up to a much higher level. But after we call it awoke in her case, although it wasn't truly a full awakening, but it was such a huge shift, it felt like awake. Once she awoke to that much higher level, then that's when the work was born in her, the 4 questions, and she began to use that to question her thoughts and stuff, but from a higher perspective. So she still went through that stage. She still had to learn what wasn't true, see what those obstacles were, let them go. But she was able to do it from a higher perspective. So that's the interesting thing about the levels, is that they aren't always 1, 2, 3, 4. I've been much more 1, 2, 3, 4 than a lot of people are. At the same time, there are people who I'm going to say pretend they've had a great awakening when they haven't. And the truth is they're completely still driven by the lower ego and they're blind to it. So, we have to be very careful about, again, wanting. If I want to be enlightened so much that I'm going to lie to myself about it, then in that way, I want to be much more accepting of my current state of mind. It's kind of an interesting balance beam to be happy with my current state of mind and yet still wanting truth and following the guidance that's leading me to truth. And it will lead us to question everything that needs to be questioned, to see through everything that needs to be seen through.
Yeah, that's what I guess I don't always trust myself to be, so systematic, because my mind, there's a lot of self-doubt. The mind comes in and doubts what it is that I said. Oh, that can't, you don't know that, or,
Yeah, that's the ego. So it doesn't matter. So that's how you got to get. You got to learn the difference between the ego and the wisdom. What's doubting here? Is it the wisdom or the ego? It's the ego. Then does the doubt? Here's what I used to say to myself. I used to say, let me see if I can remember the exact sentence. I don't think I remember the exact sentence, but the idea, I got it from a TV show and I've long forgotten, but it was in court, when that's not admissible in court. That's what I would say. That's not admissible in court, right? Doubt, the ego saying this did not come from inner wisdom. That's not admissible in court because that's ego. Anything ego says is not admissible in court. I don't even need to listen to it. Strike it from the record. It doesn't matter, So you just got to learn not to listen to the ego. That's it. And you got to learn what is ego. That doesn't count. Ego said that doesn't count. And you listen on to the inner wisdom.
I know it seems like, for me, I've been on this path for so long, and yet I still don't think I'm even at the level of the, what do you call it? Courage.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Don't worry about that. Just be where you are as fully and as genuinely and as honestly you can be. Everything else takes care of itself.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Tell you what, let's go on to paragraph 4, shall we? Let's see what happens with paragraph 4. So I'll share my screen. So we've learned now that we experience even the exact same events differently based on the individual interpretation and how much we're believing it, and based on the vibrational level that we are genuinely at. So the next paragraph says, individual scripted interpretation also comes from the code. And we've already talked about that. The thoughts that are coming into my mind, whatever opinions are showing up in this mind, that's coming from the code, right? They're not really my opinions. That's just a script that's being fed. So individual scripted interpretation also comes from the code. This facet of the code comes into the mind as your thoughts, your feelings, and your reactions. It is an interpretation of shared events, and your reaction or belief about individual interpreted code adds to the overall writing of total code and total experience. Now, this is an incredible paragraph that took me years to really see and understand. So what this is saying is, based on my vibrational level, Thoughts come into the mind. I believe them, or I'm questioning them, or I don't believe them based on my vibrational level. So, for example, if I'm still at the lower ego vibrational level, thoughts come into my mind. I believe them. I act on them. And that's just the way it is. What's really important about this is it means you're not guilty for it. That's what's important, nor is that person guilty for what they're doing. It's just the consciousness level. And believe it or not, accepting that no matter what level you're at is one of the things that springs you up in vibrational level. Guilt and shame are the two lowest vibrations. Guilt and shame are the two lowest vibrations, so they're keeping you tied, like a balloon is tied. They're keeping you tied to the lower ego. So believe it or not, one of the best things you can do is learn to accept without judgment whatever you're doing. This was so hard for me to understand. It was like my brain, it was because I was in the lower ego, of course, but my brain was like, that's impossible. It's impossible by accepting how bad I am that I'm going to become good. That's how I heard it, right? It's impossible that accepting how bad I am is going to make me good. But that's not really what this is about. It's not about being bad and becoming good. It's about being at a certain vibrational level and wanting to rise in vibrational level so that you naturally see different. Now see yourself for a moment as a little balloon. If you keep yourself tied to shame and guilt, are you going to rise? It's obvious, right? It's obvious you're not. So one of the things we need to start practicing, even when a thought comes in, let's say a thought comes in that I think, you're a jerk. The thought comes in, you're a jerk. I believe you're a jerk. I snap at you for what you just said. And then I notice it. The practice is to immediately, for me, it was always breathe, and begin to trust. For me, it was always trust that I am not guilty for what just happened. Trust, I used to call it the Holy Spirit's interpretation of me, that I am innocent, even though I just snapped. I was in the courage stage then. It felt like an effort, but that practice was the practice that began to untie the little balloon from that lowest vibrational level, or those two lower vibrational levels, shame and guilt. So, and then you also, you begin to, at least I began to practice this with myself. Maybe some of you would begin to practice it with others first, and that would be okay. Because the truth is, it needs to be practiced in both directions. I can't accept that the fact that I just snapped is innocent and then think you're bad when you snapped, right? I mean, because that's still keeping the balloon tied. So I used to call it, what I used to call this was accepting that the ego was okay. Those were the words I used with myself at that time, because I saw the ego as bad, of course. But bad is shame and guilt. So I had to accept that the ego was okay. And if you acted from ego, that's okay. And if I act from ego, that's okay. This is an important acceptance in the process of untying from the lowest vibrations on the scale so that the balloon can begin to rise in vibrational level. So I'll see if there's any questions about that paragraph. Short paragraph, but oh my God, how important. We also often call this letting go of judgment. You've heard this teaching before. It's called letting go of judgment. I'm letting go of self-judgment, and I'm letting go of judging others, right? And the antidote, this is another teaching I had from within, and everything has an antidote. The antidote to judgment is acceptance. So accepting that just happened. Accepting that I just got angry, or accepting that someone else just got angry, or accepting that someone said something racist, or I use that because that was always a big one for me. Some of you may know that. Whenever anybody made a racist statement, boy, did I have the right to judge them. I had to accept people being racists, right? Yes, Yuan.
So this kind of remind me when you say egos are okay, kind of remind me the chart you have about the Earth-X conscious level.
Yeah.
Ego is above Holy Spirit. That really kind of it's really it's confirming we're all one. We're all the same.
Yes. Yeah. And I do want to say that, it's kind of funny because, again, minds can warp this stuff because, of course, ego's in the mind. Ego is okay. That, of course, doesn't mean that I'm not still trying to let go of believing ego, right? I mean, it's just like both are happening simultaneously, right? I'm not indulging in ego, but I'm at this vibrational level where that thought came in, I believed it, and I reacted, and that happened so friggin' fast, right? That's just because of the vibrational level I'm at, that happens so fast that now my only option is, what am I going to do with what just happened? To believe I'm guilty for what just happened is still to believe the ego. In fact, if you listen to some of my old teachings, what I used to call this was double dosing with the ego. Like I just took a dose of ego, think of a shot glass. I just took a dose of ego. When the thought came in, I believed it and I reacted. If I'm now going to judge myself for that, I'm taking another dose of ego. So what I had to learn was to let go of the judgment. That just happened. And as soon as I do that, I actually start rising in vibration. It's cool, but it's not what the ego's actually saying, because the ego is saying, ego's not talking about rising in vibration. It's talking about bad and good. And you can't just pretend like you're good when you were just an asshole. That's how the ego talks, right? But it's keeping you tied down. You see, it's keeping you tied down. That kind of talk achieves the ego's goal. It keeps you tied to the ego. All right, Rhoda.
So is this the same as, have you ever heard of imposter syndrome?
No.
Okay, so there's some sort of psychology thing. Imposter syndrome says that you're constantly in a state where you just feel like the rug is going to get pulled out from under you, that nothing you ever do actually is about you, and this sense keeps coming in that the imposter syndrome is kind of like prevalent because we believe we're responsible for anything.
Yes.
So what I think I'm hearing, and I guess I want to question this for confirmation, is not only am I not responsible for the things that, seemingly go well in life, I'm not responsible when ego reaction happens. And as I raise in vibration, the willingness continues to grow, to continue to see this choice and to slow it down so that I'm not in the loop.
Yes, as you rise in vibration, ironically, you become more responsible. So as you rise in vibration, for example, you may begin to see the thought, he's a jerk, and the automatic reaction doesn't happen anymore because you're rising in vibration, but the thought is still there. And at this point, you have the responsibility of dwelling on that thought until finally you do something, or recognizing it for what it is and letting it go. At the lower vibration, you don't yet have that insight and ability, right? At the higher vibration, and you know when you do have that insight and ability. With the insight and ability actually comes the responsibility. So as you rise in vibration, you have more responsibility to live up to the capabilities of that vibration. And I forget how Dr. David Hawkins says it. He says something about that too in some way. If you go through the quotes, you'll find it.
Yeah.
So the lower vibrational people, they have less ability and therefore less responsibility. The higher vibrational people have more ability, more clarity, more, pausing. Therefore, they have more responsibility. Like if I was to get angry at you for longer than half a second, it's because I have totally allowed myself to. There's just, at my level, there's no excuse for it. There really isn't. But at my daughter's level, it might happen. Yeah. Right.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Kristen.
Hey, Regina. Oh, thank you so much. These teachings have been really great. And I'll take this off so I can talk easier. Gosh, a question I have, and this code stuff, and how do you deal with, because I know that these thoughts and these lower vibrations, when I have this awareness that I can see them and I can say, no, that's not where I want to be. But with, I have a neuromuscular disease, and I'm going to unfortunately have to major spinal surgery, and it's really scary. It could not go well. There's a lot of things they're kind of doing it, saying we're not guaranteeing you're going to get better. We just want to keep you from getting worse. And so there's a lot of fear that comes up. But I just have been really doing this whole weekend, really watching myself. And I have a lot of physical pain and a lot of periods when my spine's being, poked because that's got bone spurs. Anyways, I feel so bad physically. I hurt so bad, and I feel like I've been hit by a truck. And I notice it is so hard for me. I want desperately to be loving to my husband. And, in those times though, that it's like every second, I feel like I'm just getting squeezed. And then I wake up and I try to be kind and loving, and I get squeezed again. And there are times I just get so discouraged. And, even with guidance, this whole thing about having surgery, the more I think about it, it keeps getting delayed. And the more I think about it, I'm getting more fear, more not trusting, and but this weekend, I just was noticing how it's so hard for me to stay in this higher vibration, because that overall physical feeling is just overwhelming. It just is. And it comes and goes, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. And so I feel like I'm just always, waiting for the, what moment is it going to be that I'm just turning into what, like a bitch and being, and I don't want to be that way.
You want to be a bitch. Yeah, understand.
Yeah. So anyways, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but what do you do, Regina, those times when you got the awareness and that those thoughts aren't real, but you get so squeezed and it's like, how did I get here again?
Yeah. You may not love this answer, Kristen, but I'm going to shoot from the hip, honestly, as they say. You said I can't stay at that higher vibrational level. The truth is, you can only be at the vibrational level you're at. To try and live from a higher vibrational level that you're not genuinely at yet would create a terrible strain, and it would create a lot of pain. You have to be where you are. This is the only thing anyone can do genuinely. What happens on the spiritual path, of course, we read all these books, we get intellectually educated about these higher vibrational levels, and then we think we're supposed to be there. And doesn't mean we are just because we read about it and have a lot of intellectual information about it. We may still be here. You got to understand there's nothing wrong about where you're at. I don't care where you're at. And I'm talking to everybody right now. There's nothing wrong about where you're at. And the way that you raise in vibration is by being where you're at with as much clarity as possible. So if you become a bitch, right? Now you are back to noticing that you became a bitch and being okay with the fact that this is what happened, because you're still untying from the guilt and shame.
Well, right. Yeah. Because that gets really triggered
Yes.
that I'm,
Still where you're
not
at.
who I want to be.
Yeah, but
A
to
lot
try
of
to
the
quote,
day
not
I
be a
do
bitch,
feel,
but to try not to be a bitch. I mean, if you were at a higher vibrational level, you would actually see your pain differently. Everything is, that's the whole point of the code. You see things from where you're at. Your pain would be different, and you wouldn't be a bitch. Ramana Maharshi wasn't a bitch, and he had great pain. Okay, so what's happening is you're actually at a lower vibrational level. I know that doesn't sound fun, but it's not a judgment. And what you need to do is the work for the vibrational level that you're at. And you're still trying to untie from guilt and shame. So instead of saying, I don't want to be a bitch, blah, 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 when it happens, you say, okay, that happened. And you forgive yourself. Right? You got to work where you're at. You can't work anywhere other than where you're at. I'm always reminded of the Wizard of Oz when Dorothy wanted to get to Emerald City. We all want to get to Emerald City so we can get home, right? And she wanted to go to Emerald City. And remember the yellow brick road went like in circles. It was like going nowhere. And then she said, well, where do I begin? And they had her begin right there in that middle. And at first it was like she was going nowhere. She was just going like this and like this and like this. But one step at a time, she eventually came out of that and began walking. Most of us begin, unless we have a genuine awakening like Byron Katie or Eckhart Tolle did, that throws us several levels up and then we're healing from a higher level. Most of us are in the lower ego when this begins. And that's just where we have to start. And we're going to be going in these circles for a while, right? Until we kind of find our way out and start moving. But you got to be where you are. So forgiveness and self-love is probably what you need the most right now.
Well, and I guess I feel like I'm there more of the time. I mean, I see a real change in myself over these years. I really do. The amount of self-compassion and things in me, and I don't feel, but it seems like lately, with this physical stuff and just not being able to function, it brings up so much fear. And, that lack of trust just keeps coming back too. It's like, where did my faith go? So just, I don't know. And I guess, I'm judging myself like I should be doing it better. But then I get pulled back in guilt again. Right. So it's just that self-fulfilling prophecy. I gotcha. So what do I mean, except for forgive where I'm at? I mean, how do I get to where I'm going to rise more, hopefully with time? It just does it by continuing to just do this process of forgiveness.
Yeah, you always, I've known this from the very beginning, thank you, God. You work on right where you're at. So if right now what you need to learn is self-forgiveness and self-acceptance, that's the only thing you need to work on. And by doing that, you will just rise. And when you rise, something else will come in to work on. Okay. So and that's another thing that happens on the spiritual path, because we read all these books that are written at all levels, right? People try and do all that at once. I always tell people, I didn't do all that at once. Even the stuff I've written like NTI and Inner Ramana and MPP and Gentle Healing and 500 Days. I know people try to do them all at once. I didn't do that all at once. We got to quit trying to do everything all at once. Where am I? What should I be working on right here? That's all you need to know. And then you work on that to the best of your ability. You focus on that. That is your job now. And that's how you rise in vibration. Just be right where you're at, working on right what you need to be working on now.
And as far as trusting this guidance, I'm just really having a hard time, because there's a part of me that says, ooh, I do not want to do this surgery. Yeah. I mean, I'm scared to death, because it's one of those no guarantees, you know what I mean? Might get worse, probably not better. We're going to, you know what I mean? But it's like somebody like putting 10 pounds of hardware in my neck and you can't take it back. It's like once it's, You know what I mean? I just, more I think about it, the more absolute terrified I am. And I just don't know what to do.
Okay, but listen to what you just said, because you just gave yourself your answer. All right, I'm going to write the words out for you. You said, the more I think about it, I just get absolutely
Terrified. Right.
terrified. Okay, the key word there was thinking. What I think, I see. What I see, I experience. What I experience, I think. You're allowing your mind to dwell on thoughts about this surgery. You know, I've never been through something like you've been through, but of course I had my own challenges. What I was taught to do was not to dwell on thoughts that were speaking of fear. And sometimes that was very difficult because fear lies. Fear says, I'm here to protect you. And so the subconscious belief is, if I don't dwell on these fear thoughts, something really bad is going to happen. The only way to find out that is true, or not true, sorry, is to let go of dwelling on the fear thoughts. So what you are experiencing now is the effect of dwelling on these thoughts. That's it.
Right. No, I understand, Regina. I guess it's, you know, the decision to have the surgery is really up to me. And maybe that's what I feel like. I'm asking for guidance. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, it doesn't have to be done, but the doctor thinks that if I don't, you know, I'm not going to be walking possibly in 6 months. But yet days when I feel better and I'm more functional, I go, oh, I'll be fine. And then I have my not so good days. And I guess I just feel so confused at times. And trying to listen to inner guidance, I just don't even know who I'm listening or hearing from anymore.
Yeah, I was also taught, never try to listen to guidance while you're afraid. In other words, when you're afraid, in fact, I was told this straight out, when you're afraid, just practice, rest, accept, and trust. When you're not afraid, feel for your guidance. So you've got yourself into a position where you can't even hear guidance.
Right.
You have to let go of the fear in order to know what the guidance is.
And that's the magic question. How do I let go of the fear?
The rest, accept, and trust, and the letting go of dwelling on the thoughts. These answers are all the same. They never change.
Right.
It's just a matter of trusting the teaching. Are you willing to trust the teaching?
Right. Yeah. That I'm not a body. And, deep down, I know that.
Yeah, you don't even have to worry about that. Just, are you willing to trust that you don't even have to worry about, I'm not a body. You don't even have to go there yet. That's, believe it or not, that's higher vibrational stuff. All you have to worry about is, am I willing to trust the teaching enough to not try and make decisions when I'm in fear? When I'm in fear, to just practice, rest, accept, and trust. That's all you have to worry about. It's a much simpler lesson.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Regina.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Joe.
Thanks, Regina. And it looks like my dog's on guard and may start barking soon. So hopefully she's trying to protect me from whatever's out there, right?
Well, it's probably me, because you know what a hard ass I am. But you know how I love dogs, so don't worry about it. Even
I know.
your dog that would eat me alive, I still love her.
Do you hear that, Willow? And she looks a lot like Ellie from what I can tell.
Oh,
The black and white. Yeah. So
well, let's not get the two of them together, because Ellie would fight, so we have to keep our dogs apart. Okay.
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 Promise. A couple of things, and this has just been very helpful tonight and last week. And just one thing is the recognition that of being in the purification stage and the willingness to be in that however long it takes. There's just a sense of inner stability or something that comes with that. It's like an inner okayness. It's like, okay, most of the time. And then when the shit starts coming up, it's like, yeah, maybe it's not okay. But, just recognizing that's where I am. Okay. And like you said, I've read a lot of the other stuff and so anyway, and I just feel to, I guess, come out of the closet a little bit, to use a phrase differently. And you mentioned the racial stuff, and that was a very big part of my conditioning. And I would like to pretend it wasn't, but it was. And it's, it's just taken a long time. But what brings it up is when I didn't see the thing about the shooting until this afternoon. I hadn't paid attention to the news, and I got on the phone and saw the thing about the shooting. And when I started reading about it and seeing the situation, all of the information coming in, these, I don't know, terribly judgmental racist thoughts started coming in. But I recognized
I don't actually know the situation of this particular shooting. I just heard there was one. So was the shooter Black, or what was the detail that was affected?
The shooter was apparently a white teenage boy.
Okay.
And most of the victims were Black.
Okay. All right. Got it.
Most or maybe all of them.
Okay.
And yeah.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So just these ugly thoughts came in, and there's a recognition that this is conditioning, right? This is part of the conditioning. But at the same time, there's just this heavy guilt at even at those even being there,
Right.
forgetting that I'm not thinking the thoughts. It's like, God, what did I do to create these? This thing here, whatever it was. Yeah, and I don't. And to be honest, I didn't do anything with that. I just kind of. But when you're just talking about it now, I thought, well, I need to revisit that. Because it was just kind of ignored after that.
Yeah. If I was in your shoes, I'd probably go ahead and stay for the rest of this. But after this,
yeah.
I would probably go and just write those thoughts down. I don't care how ugly they are. I would write them as honestly as I could write them. The purpose of writing them is to be able to look at them instead of believing them, right? I used to always write out my ugly thoughts. So write them out until you feel like you don't have to write any thought twice, even if it zips around again. If you wrote it once, that's good enough. You write until you've written them all down once and you can genuinely say you're empty. And then, at least here's what I did. I asked Spirit, what do you want to share with me about these thoughts? And got whatever guidance was perfect for me in that moment. You are not guilty for your thoughts, whatever they were. Racism, I think, is as old as, believe it or not, Cain and Abel. When Cain got the mark, even though they were siblings, right? Once Cain got the mark, there were, and it wasn't racism then, but there were those and these, right? Yeah. Those and these. Racism is just a symptom of that, right? I remember when I went to Ireland, because I'd never been to Ireland before. I thought it was so ironic that they don't really have a lot of races there. Almost everybody is white, but they had the exact same those and these, the Protestants and the Catholics. It was exactly the same thing. Like, we don't need racism. We could get rid of racism. And I know we will find another way to do the those and these, because that's what we're doing. Racism is just the way we do it in America, right? So it's just like if you go to Africa, where everybody is, primarily Black, they still divide. They got Christians and Muslims, so they divide on religion, or in some, I think they divide on tribes. Racism is only a symptom. Yeah. So, you just need Spirit to start leading you to this clarity. And you just need Spirit to start leading you to how you are going to let go of not just your racist thoughts, but your those and these thoughts, your thoughts of difference, your thoughts of better than and less than. And the only way to let Spirit lead you in the way that you need to be led is to go to Spirit with those thoughts. Hide nothing. Trust your clarity. Take it one step at a time. But again, racism, as much as it seems to be a big deal, it's only the symptom.
Mhm.
The problem is the those and these. And I know that if somehow we were able to eliminate racism in this country, we would just come up with another way to divide until we're done with division.
Yeah.
Okay. And thanks for being honest. We
Thank you.
all love your
Thank
honesty.
you. Thank you. Yeah, and I have been doing the just the writing out everything pretty regular. I have journals full of that stuff,
Just
and
keep doing it.
and then asking. So yeah, thank you for the pointer of that, and
You're
for drawing out that that's just a symptom of those and these, us and them. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Jackie.
Okay, I'm trying to come on video here.
Hi.
Hi, Regina, how are you?
Good.
So it's funny, I had raised my hand earlier and then I took it down. Earlier, you had spoken about, so I want to go back to the something I'm struggling with a little bit with what happened in Buffalo yesterday with the shooting. And in actuality, the young teenager, because he was 18 years old, specifically targeted. He drove from Conklin, New York, which is upstate New York, 200 miles to Buffalo, and it was to specifically target African Americans. That's who he was targeting.
Yes.
And earlier, you had mentioned that it's all part of the code, right? Because we've all put those thoughts into the code. I think the thing that I struggle with, and don't know exactly how to express it, but it is, I felt a bit of, I will be honest, let me see. The first thought that came to mind was unsafe, that I am unsafe.
Because you're African American?
Yes, and because there is this, the word that comes to mind is generational trauma that's happened over generations. And even though, and I should say trauma that's happened to Black and Brown people over generations. And though and here, let me just say this, I don't actually believe the mind that's saying, hey, you're not safe, yet and still that thought is there, right? Like at any moment, at any time. And it could be true, it's certainly true for anyone, but situations like that happen where people of color are targeted specifically. The thought that came to mind was just a feeling of being unsafe, right? No matter where you are. So,
yeah.
And I don't know how exactly to reckon or.
No, you don't have to. My daughter's Chinese, and during the COVID, when the Asian people started being attacked, she had all these feelings. So in that way, I kind of worked with it on a very personal level with my daughter. So you don't have to explain how you feel. I think I know. First of all, let's talk about how the ego works. Again, yesterday's shooting was a Black man who, from what I understand, walked into a supermarket. Again, I'm getting my deep, I haven't heard the news. Walked into a supermarket. No.
White guy.
Oh, it was a white guy. Sorry, a white guy walked into a supermarket and targeted African Americans. I think what I heard was 10 were killed. I don't know how many were injured, right? Okay. So the ego wants me, Jackie, a Black woman, okay, because this is the character, right? Me, Jackie, the Black woman. The ego wants me, Jackie, the Black woman, who can identify with African American, to focus on this what I need to do is I need to broaden my view. I need to breathe and I need to broaden my view. Is it true that this violence, especially this walking into supermarkets, walking into schools, walking into wherever and shooting people, is it true that this is always racist? The answer is a great big giant hell no. All right. There's a myriad of reasons this happens. So the first thing I need to see is that I am identifying with and focusing on a specific situation instead of broadening my view and realizing there's a lot of different things going on here. All right. I need to back up because the ego wants me to be hyper-focused. Okay. So that's the first step. The first step is this does not deserve hyper-focus. There's a lot of violence in this country. It is not all racist. It's a variety of reasons. I mean, there was the other shooting where the guy walked into the church. That was racist. But, you know, we could list many, many more that had many other reasons to them, right? So there's a lot of violence in this country, but it is not all racist. So first of all, is it true that as a Black woman, I am less safe than other people? It's not true. You know, what about all those white kids in those schools that have been shot? You know, what about the white people that were shot in a supermarket in Colorado last year, or the white people that were shot in the, it's not true. I need to realize that the ego is trying to get me to hyper-focus. Now, once I realize that, you know, although this situation did happen, you know, we're not denying that. But once I realize that the ego is getting me to hyper-focus and I can accept that, then the next question is, why does the ego want me to hyper-focus on this situation? Because the ego wants me to stay tied to being a Black woman, the character, right? If I was Jewish, would I be focused on this? Oh no, I'm going to be focused on when the Jewish people are attacked, right? If I am Christian, am I going to focus on this? Oh no, I'm going to focus when the Christians were attacked. The ego is only trying to keep me in my identity. Once I see that clearly, the next question begins, is that what I want? Now, there's nothing wrong with being female, having a female body. There's nothing wrong with having Black skin. That's not going to go away in this lifetime. But do I need to be identified as that? And do I need to hyper focus on news stories that this would identify with? Or do I need to broaden my view, see myself as spirit, see everyone as spirit, recognize what the lower ego is doing in a myriad of situations, and realize the lower ego is the problem, not racism. And as I realize the lower ego is the problem, am I now willing to let go of my lower ego? You see, you have to kind of work through this so you get there in a genuine way. Now, I tried talking like this to my daughter. She wasn't ready for it. You know, she's not ready to see she's not Chinese and that these people are just believing their thoughts. But I did try talking to her in the same way, even though she's my daughter. I didn't take it any more personal. I wanted her to see truly too. Right? She's not ready, but maybe you are.
Thank you, Regina.
You're welcome. All right, let's see, Lena.
My question will be very quick. Dear Virginia, I really look for practical steps. This is why I was searching and I found you. And while you're giving me a lot of good suggestions, I'm a little bit lost. Where can I look for practical steps, any guidance, or what would be your suggestion?
Well,
From yours.
I got them from within. My suggestion would be start going within. You know, and the stuff I got in the beginning wasn't as brilliant as the stuff that came later. You know, when I go back and I look at my early stuff, it's like looking at a kindergartner. It's like looking at a baby, you know, and the guidance I got, you know, babyish. The clarity I got, babyish. But I kept going back. And I kept going back and I kept going back, and it matured.
Mhm.
I know from my own experience, and I know this for a fact, I know what we all have inside of us. I know the clarity that you have that can guide you. And I know it may not be fully mature now too, but I also know how to get to that fully mature point. And that's to start going within. I went within, I mean, I have a chest full of my notebooks because I went within almost every day. Very seldom did I not have something to go within and talk to within this. And again, the early stuff is kind of immature, but it's what started it. So everything that you need to undo your ego is known in you. In fact, let me see if I have this other picture here. If I do, I'll share it. Nope, that's the 4 principles. Well, I can open it. Take me 1 second to open it. So let me open it up. And then I'll share my screen. This is something we went over, you know, several weeks ago. I don't know if you were here then. But this picture, this is another levels of consciousness picture, which was based on a couple of paragraphs in the Course in Miracles text. But notice we have who I think I am, right? Underneath that is the individual subconscious. You know, this is where Joe says, you know, he was kind of taught to think racist. Interestingly, I wasn't. See, that's the only difference between me and Joe. I had 2 cousins about the same age as me who were adopted, who happened to be Black. And as a result, anybody in my family who was racist, boy, they shut up. They may have still had the thoughts, but they didn't speak them because, you know, we now had 2 Black children in our family. And my family is very good at loving and accepting family. It's just the way they've always been. So racism is no longer allowed. And I was raised with that. So my individual subconscious wasn't taught to be racist. In fact, it was taught to judge racists. You know, Joe's individual subconscious, I guess, was taught to be racist. That's why it's called individual. I was raised in one family. He was raised in another family, right? Product of our environment. But below that is the ego, where we are all the same. This is the, you know, shame, guilt, fear, pride. It doesn't matter what family you're built in, you know, what family you're brought up in. It doesn't matter what your parents taught you. It doesn't matter whether you learned racism or didn't learn racism. You still got this crap, right? We all got this crap. This is the shared ego. And then underneath that is all of the clarity and all of the wisdom. It's there inside of everyone. The problem is, the closest thing to who I think I am is the individual subconscious. The next closest thing is the ego. And what appears to be the furthest away thing is the Holy Spirit. So we have to become skilled at learning to listen to this part of ourself when all we've really ever listened to were these parts. And it takes practice. But every bit of it is already there. You don't have to go out and get it. You just got to learn how to talk to it, trust it, listen to it. And one thing that I also learned is the best way to get to the point where that Holy Spirit is louder and clearer is, first of all, to clear out those 2 levels of subconscious that are in the way, which is what it will guide you to do. It will guide you to start letting go of some of these thoughts, letting go of some of these beliefs. And by following through on its guidance, however simple that guidance is, you know, like I was once guided just to walk around saying, it's not him that's hurting me. It's my belief in my own rejectability that's hurting me. Now, if I wrote that guidance and never followed through and did that, I wouldn't have cleared the belief in rejection out of my soul. The point is, I received the guidance to say this every time the thought came in that he was hurting me, to say to myself, it's not him that's hurting me. It's my own belief in my own rejectability. and I did it. That's the point. I follow the guidance. If you receive the guidance and follow the guidance, you clear out parts of the individual subconscious and the ego that's below that. That gives more space, more clarity for this wisdom to rise up, and it becomes more mature, more profound, right? So the answer is, you got to start where you're at and just do it. But all of the, what was practical for me may not be exactly the same as what's practical and most helpful for you. The wisdom about what's perfect for you is in you.
Yeah.
So you just got to start going within, wherever you're at, no matter, and also that mind, you got to learn to ignore the ego. The ego told me over and over and over again that I was just making this up. I'm not good enough to hear, back then I called it Holy Spirit, as if Holy Spirit was out here. Notice where Holy Spirit was, it was right here, but I'm not good enough to hear Holy Spirit. You got to ignore all of that and do it anyway. But it will guide you perfectly. I promise. If you do it, it will guide you. I promise. It's kind of like the saying, if you build it, they will come. If you do it, it will guide you. I promise. I give you my word, and I know I'm right on this.
I feel it.
Yeah, but if you don't do it.
Yes. I started your NTI and I absolutely love it. But also I signed up for the MPP course, and now I'm confused because you wrote that it's not good to do together, but I love it. I don't want to stop NTI.
Well, I
Should
guess
we
if you
do
have
just NTI.
Yeah, if you really, really have the time. My concern is that people don't have the time that that they would give to one of them by themselves if they do two. And as a result, they're skimming the surface and not going as deep.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I understood what you want. I mean, I have time.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect.
As long
Thank
as you have time to go into both of them deeply. But if you're skimming the surface to get them done, then they're not doing what they're meant to do.
Yeah,
we do have at least one person that I know of who woke up from MPP, woke up. But I was her teacher. If you saw what she brought back from those contemplations and what other people brought back, somebody was going into it deeply and a lot of other people weren't. There was a difference.
Thank you. I perfectly understood. What was my point? I was a learner all my life, and I was reading, and now I feel so strong urge to finally start to practice. But of course, it's very difficult for me because I'm so greedy for new learning. It got me so excited, but I feel already there. Yes, that's enough. You need to start to practice.
Perfect. Yeah. And in fact, that's what I read a couple of weeks ago. I read a little article from my friend Liz Cronkite, where she talked about what you have to let go of is the fun of the aha of learning.
Yeah.
Right? That's the intellectual obstacle. So that you're ready to let go of that and start the practice is perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to run back to the code and see if we can get another paragraph done in 15 minutes, because we've almost used 2 hours already. Can you guys believe that? These hours just go by so fast. So let me go back to the code. So what we were talking about in this paragraph that I just read, remember, let me bring you back, is that the individual scripted interpretation comes from the code. This facet of the code comes into your mind as thoughts, feelings, and reactions. It's an interpretation of shared events, again, based on your vibrational level, and your reaction or belief adds to the overall writing of the total code and the total experience. I didn't even get to talk about this sentence. What this is saying is, and this isn't just true of me, and remember, it doesn't make me guilty because guilt is tying me down. This is true of every human on the planet. And this is why we have wars and everything else that we have, pandemics and everything else that we have, right? Storms. As I believe the code, even if I'm at a lower vibration and I can't help it, I haven't gotten to the level of responsibility yet. As I believe the code, more code just like it is created. So if I'm believing hate, more hate code is created. If I'm believing fear, more fear code is created. If I'm believing, shame, guilt, more shame, guilt code is created. So this is the loop that the world is in. We talked about the cycle earlier. This is the cycle that the world is in, and everybody's participating. All right. It's just telling us what's going on here. So let me move on to the next paragraph. With that said, here is your, now we're getting to responsibility. But remember, when I received the code, let me just tell you this. When I received the code, I was at the tail end of my courage level. And what I didn't know at this point, that within, a year or less, I was going to cross over into neutrality. So I didn't know it then, but I was almost done with purification. So I was at the highest vibrational level of the courage stage. All right. So there was a certain vibrational level there, a certain readiness there when I received this message. It says, with that said, here is your only responsibility as long as you seem to be in a body within a world. Your influence on the total comes from your interpretation of the code, which you then relive as individual interpreted code, or you choose not to relive through recognition of, here it calls it your creative ability. That's just a symbol. And the code, we'll get to that later. At some level, you must recognize your power to change the code, or you remain trapped within the belief and the acceptance of the code is real. The only way to be released from the code as you write it is to recognize your freedom and choose to write different code. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what this means, and the code will come back and talk about it later. This is where a lot of people get confused with the code. This doesn't mean that I can believe in the war in the Ukraine, or somehow I can choose to use the power of my mind to end that war. That's not what this is talking about. What this is saying is the energy that I am believing is writing code. I can choose to place my attention with another available energy. And what's really interesting about this is where we start getting very, very subtle, and you have to really tune into yourself. We have to pay attention to what options are available to me now, right? What options are available to me now? Feel for the highest available option and choose it. So I hope Kristen doesn't mind. I'm going to use her as an example because she gave us a perfect example. So let's imagine, I'm in a lot of pain and I was a bitch. I snapped at my husband. Okay, that just happened. But now I'm looking at that. If I'm looking at that, that's already a certain level of maturity. Because, some people do that and don't even look. You realize that, right? They're just bitches. They don't look. So if I'm looking at that, that's already a certain level of maturity. So I'm looking at that. When I look at that, what we have to learn to do is we have to learn to tune into now, right now. Now has nothing to do with our imagination. Now is a real thing. I tune into right now and I feel, okay, I just was a bitch. I just was a bitch. What are my options now? Now, one of those options, I can feel it coming up. One of those options is to judge the hell out of myself. And guess what? That option is here. I can feel it. Another option that seems to be coming in maybe is just say, I'm sorry. Those might be the only two options I'm feeling right now. That's what I choose between. One of those is going to pull me down or keep me tied down into the lower ego. One is raising my vibration. So if the only two options right now are to judge myself, you can feel these things. These are real. These aren't imagined. You can feel, if you look, You can feel, judge, guilt, you're awful, you did it again, or just say you're sorry. I pick just say I'm sorry, and I start raising myself in vibration. That's what this is all about, right? But you can only do that in the present moment. And you can only do that by pausing and looking and seeing what your choices are. Don't make up your choices. You know, making up a choice would be back to the intellect. So an example of making up a choice would be, and of course it's, listen to how, I'll tell you how tricky these make up choices are. The making up choices are all ego, even if they sound spiritual. So for example, a made up choice might be, I'm not supposed to see myself as a body right now, and think that's a choice. It's not a choice. That's just another flavor of the option of judgment. I'm not supposed to see myself as a body right now. Is that guilt? Hell yeah. You see, so you have to get real clear. The head, and the reason I say it's made up choices, the head is interpreting the choices available. The only choices available that came to me right now were guilt and apologize. And the apology, believe it or not, didn't say I was guilty. It was somehow different. It was clearing the air. It was coming from a sincerity, right? And then the mind, when it's throwing in all these other made up choices, if I really look carefully at them, they're actually just different interpretations of guilt. I should have thought, I should not see myself as a body right now. You know, that's not another option. So you got to look really carefully. You got to feel. You got to feel. What are my options now? I just did that. That's done. Can I change the past? No. Can I go back and not be a bitch 5 seconds ago? No. 5 seconds ago is over. But what can I do now? I can apologize. And you can feel the peace in that. You can feel the higher vibration in that, if that's the option, right? So this is what the code is teaching us. The code is teaching us how to raise in vibration by tuning into now, feeling for the options that are actually available, not made up shit options, which actually are just interpretations of the lower option. Feel for the options that are actually available now and choose the highest one, whatever it is. Don't believe I should have been able to choose higher, because guess what? That's just an interpretation of that lower one again. That's still the guilt. And you always, always, always have an option that will keep you down or even pull you lower, or one that will start to rise you up. You always have those options. You just have to pause, look, feel, and choose. Now, interestingly, both of those options come from the code. One of them came from what we'll call the wrong mind of the code, and one of them came from the right mind of the code. But they're both just code. But you're using the code, the highest vibration code, to raise higher and higher into vibration. And another trick, let's say that for some reason you look and apologize isn't an option. Maybe you have judgment. I promise you that's going to be an option. You have judgment and you have breathe, right? If you have judgment and breathe, which one's the higher option? Breathe. But then, you know, maybe later you look back and you think, well, Regina said apologize. I should have apologized. But if apologize wasn't there for you, that wasn't an option for you. And in fact, if you look at that thought, Regina said apologize, I should have apologized, when that didn't show up as an option for you, guess what that is? That's the guilt trying to call you back. You see, that's the guilt. Regina said, I should have. When you felt, did you feel apologize as an option? No, the only thing you felt was breathe. Then breathe was your highest choice. You see? The only way to use the code to raise up in vibration is to tune into now what's here, what genuinely feels better. And by better, I mean higher vibration. Right? right? What genuinely feels better. And you don't judge what the options are. The judgment, again, is just the guilt. The guilt has so many angles it's going to throw at you. Right? You have to recognize the guilt is never the angle you want to pick. I don't care how spiritual it sounds, because the devil, and using the word devil here, but that's just because this is the devilish ego here. The devil can deceive with spiritual language. You're not looking at the language, you're feeling for the feeling. Does this feel like it's pulling me up, like it's lighter, like it's moving me towards peace, it's some kind of a relief? Or does this still feel like I'm a shithead? You know, I mean, you can tell the difference. And then when you're practicing the code, there's only one rule. Keep choosing the higher vibration. The higher vibration is breathe, breathe. When you're done breathing, you check again. Okay, now what? Actually, when you breathed, you raised, I don't know how much, a little nano in vibration. Now, even a higher option can come in. Maybe now apologize comes in, you know? And then you follow that and you raise a little bit more. Now another option can come in. Maybe, you know, I have to say maybe because I don't know what's going to happen to you, but maybe that option is say, you know what, I need to go take a break and look at myself. And then maybe the next thing that comes in is to start writing out your thoughts or whatever, you know? But each time you choose the higher vibration, you raise up in vibration, so an even higher option can come. So that's the job. And I'm going to quickly kind of answer one of these questions that came in email. Somebody asked a question in email, which is kind of like, you know, can I use the code to correct some behavior? For example, I watch way too much TV. Can I use the code to correct the behavior? The code, believe it or not, is never about correcting behavior. The code has only one purpose: to raise in vibration. So if I'm sitting here watching TV, right, and I notice this judgment come in, there you go again, you fat ass couch potato, you know, whatever it is. Okay, that judgment came in. I see it. Maybe I even believed it and I felt it for a second. But now I feel, what's here? What's the highest vibration? Well, a thought comes in, well, you should get up and turn off the TV, but it has guilt in it. That's not the answer. That's just the guilt again, telling me that it's lying. It's the devil. I swear to God, even though there is no devil, but you get my point. It's the devil. It's lying. And it's telling me the highest vibration is to get up and turn the TV, but hidden in that highest vibration is, or you're still a fat lard or whatever thought it is, you know? I got to feel. Get up and turn the TV isn't the highest vibration. That's actually the guilt. The highest vibration right now is relax, you know, maybe relax. Maybe you're actually tense because you're judging yourself. Maybe it's just relax. Who knows what it's going to be? Now, eventually, don't get me wrong, as you choose the highest vibration over and over and you raise in vibration, there are behaviors that change. It happens naturally. But this isn't about changing behavior. This is about raising in vibration. Maybe you're getting drunk. Maybe you're getting high. Maybe the judgment is coming in about that. You start, okay, what are my choices here? You know, I'm a fake spiritual student. All I ever do is get high. Or what's the other option? Watch the high or whatever comes in. And you have to feel which one doesn't feel like judgment. You know, which one somehow makes something in me relax? Which one, you know, you could say feels like love, feels like peace, but it might not feel quite that high. But yet by comparison to this, it's a sliver more peaceful or a sliver more loving, maybe, right? Just comparatively, even though it's not all the way up there yet, because I haven't risen that far yet. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. We have a minute. So what I would like you guys to do this week, if you choose to, is it from Mission Impossible? This is your mission. Should you choose to accept it? Is that the line? This is your mission. Should you choose to accept it? This week, start practicing tuning in to the feeling, not the thought, because the devil lies. Feel for your highest vibration. Don't judge whether it's high enough. That's just the devil lying again. And try to start just making those choices. They're quite reachable. It doesn't ask you to ever reach way up here for something you can't actually reach for. That again, that's just the devil lying again. It's always something you really can do. Again, it might be as simple as breathe. It starts taking you up a little at a time. It's always in reach. You always can do it. You just have to tune into it, feel it, and want to do it. So try that this week, okay? Next week, we have 1 hour. Maybe we won't finish the code before the 2 weeks off, but if we don't, we don't. See y'all. Bye.